about it.
Now, I have to tell you something. I had a chance to talk with a number of people, and I also noted your book and the journey. You have a very interesting organization concerning what you're servicing in terms of discrete manufacturing. So let me ask this question, because there's a debate coming up about decoupling indirect material from direct material, and rather than having them bound together. And I've always been of the belief that they were two separate areas.
They are.
So do you find that surprising that people are just talking about now, saying, how do we decouple them?
Well, it's interesting. It depends on the size of the organization, right? Where I sort of cut my teeth in manufacturing was in the book, I mentioned Cypress Technologies was where I was at for over 10 years. And we were small enough to where it didn't matter. It was like we were buying stuff. But larger organizations, and we're now even starting to see over the last couple of years where people have titles, purchasing direct spend, purchasing indirect spend on their cards, on their titles. So we are starting to see that. It's where it needs to go, because really when you're looking at solutioning for these type of different spends, the needs are different. I mean, the best way I always describe it is like my dad worked at BP in Houston forever, and however many employees, 50, 60,000 employees with credit cards. That's a spend problem. That's an indirect spend problem. If they all go out and buy a keyboard tomorrow, that's going to be a problem. Right. But if they don't get the keyboards, or they don't get that under the control, the business will still be able to continue to service its customers. Whereas direct spend to me, has always been more along the lines of not so much a spend problem, because we already know what we're going to spend for something. It's probably in our bill of materials. It's probably been part of our cost roll up. It's more of a supplier performance problem. It's more of, I need to make sure that, I get those parts in the door when I'm expecting them, because behind that is my production schedule, my employees that I've got trained, the commitments I've made to my customer, my revenue, like that's all being stacked up back behind this. So it's a completely different thing. And so from us, from a SourceDay perspective, we solution it differently. Our entire solution is driven around what does it take to get direct materials in the door so you can run your factories, and not so much about the spend problem, right? So
right. Well, you know what, it comes to that, for want of a nail, the 5-cent piece. I often talk about Toyota, and I wrote an article about them many years ago called For Want of a Nail. And you know that fable, right? For want of a nail, the kingdom was lost. For want of the nail, they couldn't shoe the horse. Because they couldn't shoe the horse, the king couldn't ride the horse and lead his troops into battles. Because they couldn't lead them, they lost the battle and the kingdom was lost. And it was illustrating how the small little things. But what's interesting, what you just talked about, and I used this in the last conversation, is the reverberation effect that happens when there is a nail. Like Toyota's situation, they made a strategic decision to standardize as much across all of their product lines as possible with parts, reliability, right, discount, service, all of that. But when $1.67 part wasn't available, it shut down their production, 70% of their production, for a week. Now that is a ramification that goes beyond just cost and just, the slowdown or the stopping of a production line literally will be rippled throughout the whole organization, and will ultimately, I think, with manufacturing, will ultimately reach the end customer. It'll have an impact there.
It certainly will.
And that's not the same example as the keyboard. The keyboard, I say, is more what you would call acute and isolated. This, we're talking about a major issue. I mean, that's really something that interests me with what you're doing. And when I was talking with Sarah, she mentioned you probably had a number of For Want of a Nail stories that you probably share. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and maybe if you could just share one or two of them with me, please.
Well, I mean, the one that always comes to mind is actually not mine. It's a customer story, and we were really early on in the SourceDay, and I'd worked I'd worked in manufacturing for a while. I mean, we started SourceDay as a direct reflection of some of the challenges that we were dealing with, that I was dealing with. And as I started looking around and asking around, there wasn't really anything in the market that we could afford that would help solve those problems. But almost within a year or so of us starting SourceDay, so we really didn't go to market for a while. But when we finally went to market, I think it was our first or second customer we talked to. They were building large CNC machines. They were like a CNC machine manufacturer, and they had to hold up an end of year shipment for two of these machines. I think they're like $500,000 a piece, is what I recall him saying. And it was all for like a penny part, just missing something as simple as a penny part, but you can't ship it. And I tell partners all the time, it's like, you can be a bicycle manufacturer and you could have all the tires and all the frames, all the chains, all the spokes, but if you're missing seats, you're not shipping.
Right.
And that's the thing. And that seems to resonate. And that's not that way in a lot of businesses. Like the services industry, you can sort of, let's get started. Let's do something today. We can't finish it, but we can get it started. You can't do that in manufacturing. In manufacturing, you have to finish it before you can deliver it.
Right.
And it doesn't matter. Like we used to keep track of parts, and so many companies keep track of ABC parts. A parts being high dollar, but they're not a lot of quantity of them, but they're high dollar, and they really move the needle of inventory, all the way to C parts, which it's the 20-80 rule. It's like 80% of our physical inventory in terms of like quantity, but it represents like only 20% of the value of our inventory. But I always argue, it only takes one of those parts. It doesn't matter whether you're keeping really good track of your $1 million parts. If someone's not keeping track of your 1 cent parts, you're going to hold up an entire shipment. Right. So even though they're different spectrums in terms of value, they both can have the exact same impact to the business, which is, what the CNC machine guy did.
Well, now this leads to an interesting question, because I want to use that as an example, but we're recording this for a reason, because this is a great conversation to share. Your expertise behind the technology. You see, one of the things I've been talking about is that, you see all these charts, Deloitte's 50 up and comers, Dr. Epstein, and the CPOs who I talk to, the practitioners, say, how do we choose out of a logo? I mean, it's so crowded. And one of the things I said is that organizations, service providers, have to step out from behind their logo and showcase what their real advantage is, which is not the technology itself, but the expertise and the experience behind that technology, and the ability to help users, clients, get the most out of that. And I don't think you could have somebody who is specialized in one area automatically swapping over and doing in another area. You want people. So going back to what you said earlier, Clint, I mean, the reality is you've created almost like the old basic MAI basic 4 days, industry specific application, which you've done. You figured a solution based upon the fact that you're in that, or we're in that industry. So you knew the problems to solve. And so it adapts so much easier to what needs to be done, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it is very helpful to come from being a practitioner, no doubt about it. A lot of what is in the very early formations of the solution. I mean, now we have product teams and developers all over the place, but back then it was just a few of us, and we were whiteboarding out these very specific use cases, and being a practitioner and understanding what those were really helped drive the business. And the thing is, like, this is what's remarkable about it, is the problems that we solve for are very easy concepts to understand. It's a very easy concept to understand in terms of what we do, but so few companies, this is why it's such a great opportunity for us, is that so few companies invest in the area of procurement. That's one of the, or supply chain. That's just one of the things that businesses, they're so very willing. I was having this conversation with a partner this morning. It's that your customers are probably very willing to do anything that it takes to add more revenue, or add more customers, or build widgets faster and better. But how many of them have actually gone back and invested into their world of procurement which is probably something they've probably been doing it the same way for 20 or 30 years in some cases. But once you get people to understand sort of what we do, because we were so specific to this use case, it's a very easy concept to understand. It's like, you're not getting your parts on time. You have suppliers that are hurting your business. It could be your buyers. It could be both sides of the equation. It's not just a supply problem. But the end of the day is, you want your parts on time, every time. And that's an area of the business that so few companies have invested in it.
Well, you see, and that's where the intricacies of what you do come in. I mean, a lot of people still work on spreadsheets, but one of the things that come up is, how many times does a PO change? How many times does situation change from when the first order goes through? And a lot of it comes down to the timeliness of the information that you, so that you can react to it effectively.
Correct.
It's like, if you're scrambling at the last minute. I remember some large players, Celestica and other companies, saying that they would have to go to secondary and tertiary suppliers, and the deeper they had to go into those alternatives, the more expensive the part became, or the product that they needed became. So what you're doing is you're tracking it, but you're giving enough time so that you can be proactive, rather than being put in a position of last minute reaction. I mean, that's what I see about the intricacies coming through. But that experience starts with you, though, right? Understanding where those breakdowns could occur.
Yeah, sure. I mean, where that experience comes from is, I was telling that same partner this morning. When I was running a manufacturing company, every Monday morning, by clockwork, we had a production meeting. And in that production meeting, we talked about, these are the things that we need. These are the products we need to get out the door. Tell me what our stop points are. What's going to hurt us? What are the no-goes? And I would say probably 80 to 90% of the time, it was some kind of supplier issue, meaning we're not going to get I shouldn't say supplier issue. It's a part issue. Now, whether we self-induced it or whether the supplier is doing something, that's a whole different story to be debated. But the end of the day is that when I asked for updates from my team, there was no way for them to just go quickly access that information. They would spend hours chasing down by suppliers and getting updates and feeding spreadsheets and sending emails, frantically trying to make sure they were ready for that meeting, in my example. And that's crazy, right? Like, in today's day and age, we should be able to very easily be able to do that. So yeah, coming from that experience, knowing not only the burn it puts onto our the procurement teams in terms of workload, but just having that information timely so we could make good decisions about our production. I didn't want to invest in something that week if I couldn't ship it that week.
Right.
And so I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly what dominoes were going to fall and what I could expect, so I could put my team in the best position to build products that we could test and ship and get out the door. So that all comes from just hands-on, real world, being disappointed, feeling, all the things that you go through. You're like, oh, there just has to be a better way than the way we're doing it now.
So that's where you get out ahead of these things, and you're not pointing fingers at what happened with Toyota or other companies. The fact remains is you put yourself in a position to be able to have that information at your fingertips in real time, so you can make intelligent decisions and options too, right? I mean, you have to not only know there's a problem with supplier A, but certainly having other options with suppliers is a key. I mean, can you prevent the nail syndrome, or can you just merely lessen its impact time?
Well, I mean, we've talked about that internally, right? Can we prevent? I'm not ever going to sit there and say we could prevent, right? But I think we can help and we can improve. There are certainly scenarios. I mean, I'll give you an example of prevent. This actually happened in real world. We have, I'm not going to name who they are, but a very large computer company was started using SourceDay, and when they plugged into our application and we onboarded one of their suppliers to the application, they immediately saw, this particular supplier saw 3 purchase orders that had been completely overlooked. Now, I guarantee you 100% of the time that had we not been a part of that equation, all 3 of those would have been in the nail.
Wow.
Right, it would have been a problem. But now that we're making sure that no POs are left behind, 100% PO delivery, 100% PO acknowledgement and or visibility. So, hey, these purchase orders have not been addressed. These are going to be problems for you if you don't do something quickly. Right now, a buyer that's not using SourceDay has to treat every PO the same. And we know in the today's world, we need to be able to have some help to manage our day by exception. And so I can, if I know that these 80 are happy path and these other 20 are not, I can focus my time on the 20 and probably have a better outcome on those 20 than if I have to treat all 100 the same.
Exactly. You know what? It makes perfect sense. That's what makes it interesting in terms of the timeliness of the process. Well, look, Clint, I appreciate your time. I didn't want to take up a whole lot of it.
Yeah.
Does it seem like you have a good understanding of your story and what SourceDay does?
You want me to go over that?
Well, do you think I have a good understanding of that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Good. No, I think your timing is perfect for the industry now, especially with the wake up call we had all received after the pandemic. I think that woke up a lot of people that really saw the extended impact or the ripple impact of the supply chain not working.
Well, let me end with this one thing, and this drives Sarah and my team crazy that I use this analogy, but I love it, so I'm using it. Okay. Venmo. Right. Whenever I do a speaking session, I start my session with Venmo. I say, do you have a cell phone? It's a cell phone. You can't tell her, but do you have a cell phone? Who here is familiar with Venmo? I said, isn't it crazy that you and I can send money to each other, and I can send $5 to my kid, and I know he has it for lunch money. I know he has it. He knows he has it. It happens instantaneously. But yet all you manufacturers in this room are going to cut tens of millions of dollars in purchase orders this year and have no visibility into the status of those POs.
I love that analogy. First of all, because when you have kids, you know what it's like to send me $10,
yes,
$5. So right away, that's very real. I mean, that's got to resonate with the audience.
Yeah, I'm like, so it's time for change in your world. You've been doing it the same way for 20 or 30 years. Meanwhile, really in most scenarios, if material doesn't come in, it's going to be their fault.
Yeah.
So we've got to make sure that we get them the tools and the things they need to be able to be much more connected and have the visibility they need, like we do with Venmo.
Absolutely. I love that analogy. I'm going to include it in because we're creating, as you know, the document for this, etc. And the interview here that we're talking about, I want to use it for promotional purposes. But yeah, I love that. I mean, that's simple. You can get it right away. It explains it in 10 seconds. Anyway, listen, Clint, thank you so much for your time today. It's good to meet you. I know we'll be talking again in the future.
Likewise. Thank you, John. Bye-bye.
Bye.